A man that can control his procreative energy will gain access to higher realms of thought. Accumulated sexual energy strengthens the faculties of sense and perception. Hearing is sharper, as is sense of smell. Quality of sight, touch and taste are both enhanced. Conserved semen takes the burden off the brain and nervous system. As a result, the available nourishment works to enhance these faculties. One's imagination, creativity, spatial awareness, mobility, strength, courage, intuition, and social awareness greatly increase. It gives you an edge in social interactions and helps you better navigate the direction of conversation. It allows for sharper articulation of your thoughts into words. There are many improvements that come from a mind no longer burdened by the major physiological drain of sexual activity. Your sexual conservation will open up a new level of perception. It allows you to probe deeper, to see connections that most people overlook, and to better understand the intentions and thoughts of others. With this heightened awareness, you're able to make wiser decisions that lead to better outcomes. You can use this power to transform your life, and because so many men have yet to discover it, it gives you a massive advantage. An English physician, Dr. Nags, writes on this same subject. Strict continence enables the essence of these sexual secretions to be reabsorbed into the body. This not only makes for health, but also builds up those creative, intellectual, and intuitive faculties which show themselves in the work we do. Moreover, when we have learned to control this reproductive function, to turn inwards the mighty forces which it represents, we have solved one of the most important problems of existence, which brings us nearer to that superhuman stage to which we must ultimately attain. In order to understand how sexual conservation opens up higher realms of thought, let us first investigate the effects of sexual excess on the brain and functions of the body. The following is a description of the effects of masturbation written over 120 years prior. Perhaps the most constant and invariable, as well as earliest signs of the masturbator, are the downcast, averted glance and the disposition to solitude. Prominent characteristics are loss of memory and intelligence, morose and unequal disposition, aversion or indifference to legitimate pleasures and sports, mental abstractions, stupid stolidity, etc. A distinguished German physician, Gottlieb Vogger, gives the following truthful picture. The masturbator gradually loses his moral faculties. He acquires a dull, silly, listless, embarrassed, sad, effeminate exterior. He becomes indolent, averse to and incapable of all intellectual exertion. All presence of mind deserts him. He is discountenanced, troubled, inquiet whenever he finds himself in company. His memory daily losing more and more. He is unable to comprehend the most common things, or to connect the simplest ideas. The greatest means and the most sublime talents are soon exhausted. Previously acquired knowledge is forgotten. The most exquisite intelligence becomes naught, and no longer bears fruit. All the vivacity, all the pride, all the qualities of the spirit by which these unfortunates formerly subjugated or attracted their equals abandon them, and leave them no longer aught but contempt. The power of the imagination is at an end for them. Pleasure no longer fawns upon them, but in revenge. All that is trouble and misfortune in the world seems to be their portion. Inquietude, dismay, fear, which are their only affections. banish every agreeable sensation from their minds. The last crisis of melancholy and the most frightful suggestions of despair commonly end in hastening the death of these unfortunates, or else they fall into complete apathy, and, sunken below those brutes which have the least instinct, they retain only the figure of their race. It even frequently happens that the most complete folly and frenzy are manifest from the first. Such descriptions of the negative effects of masturbation were commonplace centuries before, and many of these books referred to clinical experience with patients and research in the field. Of course, most of this knowledge is disregarded in contemporary science and medicine. However, it is important to note that many of the claims have not been specifically debunked per se, just that the overall perspective on sex and masturbation has shifted away from seeing it as detrimental. Interestingly, however, sexual activity, reproduction, and gonadal activity are still seen as highly taxing and degenerative to the organism from the perspective of biology. And I think the biological perspective follows closer to logical reasoning, at least from my own perspective. Your conserved energy saves the expenditure of precious nerve energy via the spine and nutrients via the blood. Abstaining reduces the secretions of various glands, such as the prostate, the Cowper's gland, seminal vesicles, and the testes, all of which demand significant levels of biological substances in order to produce semen. In fact, the prostate is the richest zinc-storing gland in the male body. Zinc is also very important for healthy brain function. It is needed for neurotransmitter function, synaptic plasticity, neurogenesis, and also acts as an antioxidant, helping protect brain cells from oxidative stress. Zinc is vital for brain function and thus thought quality. Without the smooth and optimal functioning of the brain, it will of course be harder to synthesize deeper and more profound levels of thought. Without the synaptic power, it will be harder to form connections between concepts and ideas. How could the continual excretion of such substances from the prostate not come with the biological cost to the organism, especially heavily zinc-dependent organs like the brain? Inside your brain resides a small section known as the little brain, which in Latin is translated to cerebellum. It is located just above the brainstem in the back section. Although it is a small part of the brain, it houses over half of the brain's neurons. The old books on medicine wrote that the cerebellum was the seat of amativeness, that is, sexual desire and love. Although this belief isn't held today, it has not been explicitly disproven from what I have read. It was thought that the drainage of the sexual powers drained the powers of the cerebellum. Among the brain's many regions, the cerebellum holds one of the closest relationships with the eyes, carefully coordinating precise eye movements and stabilizing vision during motion, among other processes. It is perhaps this connection that explains the often reported effect that sexual excess has on the eyes. The cerebellum, however, is also responsible for movement and mobility in the body. Written in the 1800s, the fact that the small brain in which amativeness is located is also the coordinating or harmonizing power of the muscular system explains why sexual excesses are so soon followed by a weakening of the joints, and especially the joints of the knees, a softening of the muscles, a want of strength, and a motion of an unsteady, dragging nature, differing so noticeably from the springing, strong, elastic carriage of the continent individual. Noticeably, in many ways do sexual excesses affect the brain. The faculty of memory is weakened and impaired. the person gradually lacking his usual power to remember men and things. The eyes are also affected. Disordered vision is almost always a prompt indication of abused amativeness. The eyes are easily affected by night lights, and any ordinary effort strains and hurts them. The hearing is also in many cases impaired. Paralysis of the lower extremities occasionally results. Neuralgia, affecting any part of the system, is among the frequent consequences. More than half the cases of epilepsy are unmistakingly owing either to sexual or self-abuse. Fickleness of temper, irresolution, and premature old age are penalties that attach themselves indiscriminately to all who violate the laws of their organization. This list of diseases, the result of sexual abuse, is but a partial one, for in the abnormal exercise of amativeness, the great drain of the nervous fluid and the loss of semen, 1 ounce of which is equal to 40 ounces of blood in any other part of the body, so lowers the life force as to form the foundation for and lay open the system to all manner of contagious, acute and chronic diseases. And in this way, though sexual excesses may not be the immediate cause of sickness and premature death, it in thousands of cases is the remote cause. Much of this connection between the cerebellum and the genitals was said to be attributed to the close proximity of the spinal cord. The idea that semen causes elements of the spine to be discharged is not supported by modern science. However, it has not been disproven specifically, I believe. It was also said that derangement of the cerebellum often indicated a derangement of the genitals. Many who had a diseased cerebellum also had suffered from constant erections with little desire. Modern biology rejects the connection between sperm and the spinal cord and spinal marrow. This connection was first illustrated, however, by the father of medicine, Hippocrates. Hippocrates wrote that semen originated from the brain and spinal cord, specifically from a fluid carried by veins and nerves. He believed this fluid, which he associated with myelos, a term referring to spinal marrow and other vital fluids, was crucial for generation and could be affected by injury or imbalance, leading to various ailments. While not the sole source of semen, the spinal cord was considered a key pathway for its transmission to the genitals. Perhaps the cost to the brain and the process of thought incurred by sexual excess is similar to that of accelerated aging. Every human experiences a physical peak, after which deterioration inevitably begins. A gradual descent that continues until death. Biological processes that heavily burden the system can hasten this aging trajectory. Among all such processes, those linked to reproduction may be some of the most energetically demanding. How are we to function and think at our highest levels when constantly paying the physiological tax of sexual indulgence? In order to delve deeper into higher realms of thought, we are going to need a higher supply of nerve energy and bloods. How can this be achieved when one is in a constant state of sexual activity and devoting all their resources to semen production? It is no coincidence that the overly sexual man or creep is often portrayed as stupid and single-minded, whereas the nerd or genius is often less interested in sexual matters. It is why the man talking to the very attractive girl suddenly loses his train of thought and ability to think. By choosing to invest heavily in the sexual side, we choose to take heavily from the mental side. Thus, the secret to developing a deep and intuitive, intelligent mind lies in providing the mind the ample resources to function at a high level, and the best way to provide those resources is to eliminate the burden of reproduction. to stop activating the sexual system. Good luck.